Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube reviews. And today I'm going to be reviewing a very polarizing film in this particular franchise, and that is Rob Zombie's remake slash reboot, reimagining, whatever you want to call it. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2007. This movie, like I said, it polarizes the Halloween fan base. Some fans love it, some fans really do not like it. And I happen to really like this film, as do I like the sequel. And both of these movies are very much their departure compared to the movies that came before. But where we last left Resurrection, it basically was the end of the franchise once again. Even though technically they were going to do some more movies afterwards, but it just never materialized. And basically, the only thing, I love Resurrection. You may think of me as being totally out of my mind for loving the movie, but I like Resurrection a whole lot. I think it had some very good ideas. Bringing back Rick Rosenthal as the director, who he'd produced directed Halloween 2. That was great. And it was meddled with by the studio a lot, and there was a lot of studio meddling going on within all of the movies up to this point. That, of course, the Halloween movie, all of the Dimension Halloween films had featured significant studio meddling, and especially Halloween 6. That's a subject for another day. But the big thing with the big ideas after Halloween Resurrection that I saw was that it was going to be prequels. I saw one called Halloween The Missing Years, a direct sequel to Resurrection that brought back Josh Hartnett's character, and basically he was avenging his mother's death. A movie that brought back the Man in Black and basically explored his whole character and his whole motivations in the movies. And I don't know whether that movie was supposed to tie all of the movies together or what was supposed to happen, but and if I was them at that point, that's what I would have done. I would have tied all these movies back together. Because, they split the continuity with H2O and Resurrection. I would have tied them all back together with 9, or at least started doing that with a 9th film. But, the big thing I saw was that they wanted to do some sequels, prequels. A direct sequel to Halloween Resurrection was tossed around as well. There was also Pinhead versus Michael Myers, which I think that was shot down by Mustafa Akkad, because I think Clive Barker was supposed to write the film, and John Carpenter was supposed to direct, and that would have been awesome. That would have been totally awesome, but I have no clue how that would have worked. I have really no idea at all, but instead they went with the remake. And Rob Zombie, by this point, he had directed 2 films. House of a Thousand Corpses, which was shot back in 1999 and 2000, and basically it was done with Universal, and then Universal rejected the movie, and it was then shelved. Then Rob Zombie released a movie with Lionsgate, and who were kind of getting started as a company at the time. And I love House of a Thousand Corpses. House of a Thousand Corpses. I think House of a Thousand Corpses is a very good movie. It and the movie The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 both share a similar vibe. They're both kind of brutal but goofy at the same time, and I do like that. I like House of Thousand Corpses a lot, but the follow-up, Rob Zombie's sophomore effort, The Devil's Rejects, I really love. Devil's Rejects to me is a fantastic movie from start to finish. I think in that movie, I think the hotel scene is a little bit slow, but I mean, as for that, I mean, that was kind of the point. It was supposed to be Rob Zombie just basically punishing you throughout the movie at that part, basically showing you people degrading these other people. And I mean, I love Devil's Rejects. The Devil's Rejects was actually positively received. I know a lot of critics, Ebert and Roper at the time, they both, I know Roger Ebert liked the movie. I think he gave it 2.5 or either 3.5 or something like that out of 4 stars. And I mean, it had to be good for him to like the film. I love The Devil's Rejects, and I say straight up right now that the 2 Halloween films killed his career, because after Halloween 2, every one of his movies has been very low budget movies. I think The Lords of Salem, I think it was theatrically released, but after that, 31, Three from Hell were both Fathom event movies and not very big budgeted movies at all. And I'll explain why I feel that this movie killed his career, because I mean, he had proven that he was a good director and could do a pretty decent story. When, I mean, the story itself with The Devil's Rejects to me was awesome. And, I mean, you had a kind of minor character in the previous movie's brother going after these people. I mean, it just made for a great film. And, I mean, once again, kind of, I think, picks up from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. But, Halloween is a beloved franchise and movie. I mean, the original 78 John Carpenter Halloween is up there with like Psycho, Night of the Living Dead, the old Universal monster movies. I mean, it's a beloved movie. I mean, it's a horror classic, and it's a horror classic for a reason. It's, to me, a perfect film. I mean, regardless of some of the nitpicking that I've heard a lot of other people do about the movie, saying, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, I think it's a perfect horror movie. By far the best in the franchise. But, I mean, sooner or later, with the new trend of remakes coming with Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 2003, it was sooner or later going to get remade. And it, I think it surprised a lot of people when it was Rob Zombie who was the director and also the writer. And the biggest reason why is because Rob Zombie is a different type director and writer than, say, John Carpenter. Because Rob Zombie is a straight-up Grindhouse director. His influences is movies like, of course, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a lot of very, Grindhouse films, like Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, stuff like that. And John Carpenter, I can't really explain it. Really and truly, Rob Zombie's not he's not a Hitchcockian director like John Carpenter is. And that proves right there why I'm not saying he was the wrong choice for this movie, but maybe he maybe he should have been toned down a lot for this movie. But, I mean, it's a remake, and Zombie was advised to do his own thing. And, I mean, he went and got his blessing from John Carpenter. And John Carpenter told him straight up, he said, do your own thing. And, of course, John Carpenter has later said that he did not like the movie and has voiced some pretty harsh opinions on Rob Zombie. But, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that that Rob Zombie was the wrong director. Maybe in essence he was, because he was going, I call this the Grindhouse version of Halloween. It's what I call this movie. Because that's pretty much, in my opinion, what it is. Because the original movie relied more on suspense and less on gore. And this movie relies on gore and tries to add suspense in there when it can. I mean, I call this movie basically a more detailed version of the original movie. I mean, because after it enters the halfway mark in the movie and goes into pretty much a beat-by-beat version of the original movie, it's basically a lot more detailed this time around, and it tries to explain things, I think, a little bit too much. And the reason for that, the biggest thing I can tell, is that Rob Zombie wanted to make these movies realistic. And he didn't want Michael to be a supernatural character. He wanted Michael to be a human being. And, I mean, his biggest idea with it, he wanted to do a prequel. And then the remake. And the studio axed that and said, we want a remake too. And, I mean, Dimension Films, things have come out now with that whole thing, but, I mean, they wanted the remake, and they got it pretty much. I mean, the first half of this movie is, and I'm not going to get into the whole plot of the movie, because, I mean, it's pretty much plot-wise, it's the same movie. It's part one with elements of part two thrown in there. So you've got, like, Laurie and Michael are both related automatically in this movie. She's shown as a little baby earlier in the film when Michael's a child. And, I mean, that's pretty much, from the beginning, they're related. And I do like that he brought that in. And basically, from what I can tell, Rob Zombie went into this movie basically to perfect what he thought was wrong with the original. Basically provide the answers to the questions some people may have had, or he may have had. And, I mean, really, I don't see any, I mean, I don't nitpick well, I'm not going to say I don't nitpick movies, because I very well do. But the original Halloween, I don't, because, I mean, to me, like I said, it's a perfect film, in my opinion. I mean, it's as perfect as it comes when it's, to me, it's a definitive horror movie. Up there with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, stuff like that. And Rob Zombie, he put in a lot of elements from Grindhouse cinema, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I love Grindhouse cinema it's just as much of a genre as any other genre of movies. And, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I love very gritty films like that. And those older exploitation films. I love all that. And I do love that he took that and and he put his influences into this film. And basically took Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or going from his filmography at the time, he took House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects, threw them into a blender with the original Halloween, mixed them together, and this is the movie you got. And more so, Devil's Rejects in this movie and the original Halloween are basically what you get with this movie. And the first half of the movie, like I said, it's basically a prequel, and Michael's shown as a little kid, and basically he goes berserk and kills everyone because of him being mistreated. And that's one thing I can say about Rob Zombie. He knows how to get a good cast. I mean, the biggest shoes he had to fill with this movie is Dr. Loomis. And I think he did very well with Malcolm McDowell. I think Malcolm McDowell does very well as Loomis. Is he Donald Pleasance? No. And he's not Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis. But he still is, he brings his own element to the character. And that's what I like. I like his version of the character in the sequel, the next movie, which I'll talk about later. And I contemplated doing both movies in one episode, but I'm going to give them their respective episodes. But, after the halfway mark, it follows Michael in the institution, and basically, it follows up on that prequel movie that was set to come out beforehand. But, this movie, I give it probably an 8 out of 10. It may sound like I'm praising the movie and throwing the movie under a bus at the same time, but I love this movie. It's one of those movies in a franchise that has several different versions of the movie. The version I prefer the most is the work print version. I think it has a much better flow and is influenced a lot more by the Devil's Rejects, because it has a whole opening sequence in the movie, which I do like. And I do enjoy this film quite a bit. And the work print version is a very good version of the film. Probably, like I said, I probably prefer that the most out of all of them. It has a better flow, in my opinion. A lot of things are very different in the work print. Danny Trejo's character does not die in that version. Basically, I think he did that to appease the studio, because that was a big argument within the production of this film, because Rob Zombie felt that at least he wanted to show Michael had no sympathy, and that someone who was good to him, he would still kill. Michael had no sympathy for anyone. And I think it was a good decision, and a ballsy decision. And I think it I've always kind of agreed with that decision to kind of do that, because I really never had anything against the decision to do that in the film. But the studio supposedly did. It was Danny Trejo, so that's probably the biggest thing. He was a big actor within the studio as well at the time, with working with Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, and he was kind of a big deal for the studio. But you then got the director's cut, which is kind of a combination of the work print and the theatrical cut. And there's a scene in the middle of it, his escape scene in the director's cut, I have no actual problem with. It is what it is, the way I look at it. It's kind of dumb, but it is what it is. It doesn't bother me a whole bunch. I do prefer the whole him breaking out and taking out all the guards. I prefer that too. That's in the theatrical cut. If they would have took the theatrical cut escape scene and thrown it into the director's cut, I would have liked it a lot better. But, yeah, I mean, the theatrical cut's much more faster paced, chopped down version, much more of a Halloween movie than maybe the director's cut and the work print. Well, maybe more director's cut is. It's not as diverse as the next film. I will say that this film is not as diverse with reaction as the next movie. The next film is predominantly hated from what I see. I've heard a lot of people not like that film. I like that movie. Sometimes I think it's better than this movie. Sometimes I think it tells a better story than this movie. But, I mean, whatever the case may be, I mean, your opinion is your opinion. I probably give this movie an 8 out of 10. I love this movie, even though I probably criticized it a whole lot throughout. I love Rob Zombie as a director. He's a very polarizing director. Some people love his work, some people hate it. I love all of his movies except Lords of Salem. Lords of Salem I did not get into at all. I have really no interest in watching it ever again, but I mean that's whatever. Yeah, I give this movie an 8 out of 10. I love this movie. I'm going to kind of do a series on polarizing films and franchises. This is the first one. I'm going to do Resurrection as well as this movie sequel. As well, I'm going to do the 2018 film. I'm going to throw it in there. Heck, maybe I should throw all of the movies except for the first one in there because, I mean, for the most part, they're all polarizing films besides the first movie. But, I hope you enjoyed this review of Halloween 2007, Rob Zombie's Halloween. More or less my critique and analysis of the film, more than maybe a review. Don't get me wrong, I love this movie. I'm continuing to say it because I kind of think I've criticized this movie more than I showed love for it. And probably rambled on a lot throughout as well. But I hope you enjoyed this review. Like, comment, subscribe. Whatever. Tell me what you think of this. I'm introducing a new format. I hope you like it. I'm trying to add some more touches to the whole thing. And I'm recording outside, so if you hear stuff, then it's because I'm outside. Maybe if you hear dogs barking or something, I'm outside recording this. So, hope you enjoyed this review, and thank you so much.